Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we're working to build a life around getting outdoors through learning from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, a journalist originally from a beach in California, now learning to love nature from my home in Alaska. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter the weather. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same. If you love what we do, you can leave a 5-star review or support Humans Outside on Patreon. Ready for the good stuff? Let's go. When Carmen Rendell became a therapist and founded Soul Hub, she was working to change her path. After 20 years in corporate life working in marketing for big brands in the UK, she realized that none of her work filled her in that meant to be doing this kind of way. So instead, she sought time with shamans, attended the school wizards, and worked on herself. And after it all, founded the company Soul Hub, a place of self-discovery and understanding where she focuses on a practice called walking therapy. Today, Carmen is going to tell us all about walking therapy, her self-connection and reflection, and her journey to understanding in the outdoors. Carmen, welcome to the Humans Outside podcast.
Thank you, Amy. Delighted to be here with you.
And where are you joining us physically from?
I know, we were just saying as we look at the maps and we talk about the outside, I think you have to find the outside in everywhere, right? Because I'm actually in the middle of London. So I'm in the southwest of London, a place called Kew. So probably I can hear the planes fly over from Heathrow Airport. So about 20 minutes from the airport.
Awesome. Okay, so we usually start our podcast talking about our favorite outdoor space and just imagining ourselves in our guests' favorite outdoor space as if we were hanging out somewhere outside having a chat. So where are we with you today?
I'm actually going to go to Patagonia, so right down into the bottom of South America, partly just because it's so wild. It's the wildest place I've been. So my experience of it has been pretty much kind of rocking me to the ground with the high winds. So I've never felt the force of winds quite like it, where I'm actually been walking along and I remember being there with two friends and actually going, let's go to ground. And we literally dropped to the floor to not be blown off our feet. So it's a real visceral feeling to feel the elements that strongly against you. So that it's always etched in my memory as kind of like a favorite place and a provocative place, right? So let's go to Patagonia.
Awesome. I understand the wind concept here in Alaska. We call it big wind, and and it comes off the glacier, which makes it sound exactly as cold as it is. So
yeah, I mean, even in Patagonia, I was with a friend actually from Chicago, and I had not experienced it quite like this. I was sitting on a rock actually with my camera, taking a picture of the glaciers, and the next minute I was blown off the rock. So with no warning, nothing to try and hold on or anything. That was it, off the rock, and obviously I hadn't planned to know that I was going to fall off. So when I fell off, all she could see is my hand up with the camera. So you could just see a camera hanging in the air, and luckily it was just I was in a bush and not off the edge of the cliff. And
no kidding.
Yeah.
So tell us your outdoor story. What is your connection to the outdoors, and how did you become somebody who values spending time outside?
I guess as with all these things, right, it kind of starts in childhood. So I grew up by the sea. And if you knew this place in England, you kind of question whether, even though it's called Weston-super-Mare, which means on the sea, it's actually on the Bristol Channel. So when you look out, it's quite brown and murky, right? It's not like beautiful kind of Atlantic coast or anything. But that's where I grew up. We had a sandy beach. So, I remember cross-country runs during my school where we had to run over the sand dunes and then literally run along the beach to an outdoor swimming pool called the Tropicana and run back. It was about a 16-minute cross-country run. And we did it in all weathers. It didn't matter. We were, off we went in our shorts and T-shirt, freezing cold. And sometimes some people would hide in the sand dunes because they didn't want to brace the winds off the sea when we went over them. But kind of, I guess, from that age, I would be outside, and I played field hockey was my kind of main sport. And As you can imagine, at least with ice hockey, you're inside. Field hockey, again, you're kind of out with the elements in short skirts, often standing around and having to run around to try and keep warm. And then family holidays. So we would always, mum and dad would take us camping. So we'd be all over the UK or go into Europe, into France, southern France, and go camping. So there'd always be walks, we would kind of go on coastal walks. And I guess it was free, an easy way to entertain your kids. There were 4 of us. So, we'd always take a tennis ball with us and throw the ball around and walk and just have time together as a family. So, I have fond memories of that. So there's always been, I like both, I like coming in, I won't deny it, coming into the fire and the warmth, but it feels much better once you've been in the outdoors.
Yeah. I was just thinking like that the reason that coming in is so nice is because you weren't there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How did that experience and that touchdown with your childhood morph into the idea for Soul Hub?
So I guess, following that, I probably then spent 20 years in a box, right? So working, in corporate offices, and my university background was sport. So as I said, kind of field hockey was my thing, but, almost any types of outdoor sports, so tennis and golf. And then kind of when I came to London in my early 20s, I kind of worked in sport, but more than like obviously the back office kind of sponsorship and then advertising space. And I guess, started playing that London living game where you would just literally work and then go home, and then at weekends I would play sport and realize that I wanted more to life than that. So I kind of took off for a year traveling around the world, and for most of that part, hence the story around Patagonia, I kind of went to South America, I went to Indonesia, I went to North America, and everywhere I went I would be kind of craving mostly walking, but that outdoor experience. And, so I went to kind of Colca Canyon in Peru, walked kind of New Zealand's and the mountains in southern island of New Zealand. So I'd always kind of be searching it out. And then actually as I returned from that year of exploration, let's say, I'd kind of looked for the next adventure, which at that time took me onto a sailing boat, which was something I'd never done before. So I had a crash course of 3 weeks of learning how to sail the high seas. And then literally off I went, off to Australia, and sailed from Brisbane in Australia to Qingdao in China. And so, maybe we'll come back to that story, but there was something in me that wanted to create my own thing. And I guess I through all this kind of went on my own personal journey of discovery, and wanted predominantly to create a place where people could come to help understand themselves better. And it was partly actually inspired. I went to Seattle with a friend Rachel and stayed with a friend Sarah, and the 3 of us went to, Oprah's Get the Life You Want weekend. And when and when you're in a room that's filled with Elizabeth Gilbert spoke and Oprah spoke, and the energy in that space was incredible. And it was just kind of, what do you want to do with your life, And I thought, it isn't sitting in an office all day, every day. And so there I knew I wanted to do work that helped other people. And I think that's probably kind of, where the seed started around Soul Hub. And then it's kind of organically grown really from there. And combining, I guess, parts of me over the last 5 years, of which Soul Walk and walking therapy has come into that mix.
Okay, before we talk about Soul Walk and walking therapy, I want to go back to sailing because to me this is such an incredible part of your story. First of all, to purposefully get on a boat like that when you have no experience doing that, and that's such a long commitment, right? That's really brave.
Or crazy, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in retrospect, was it brave or crazy?
Do you know what? I think part of it is, I remember my brother saying to me, because somebody nearly died when I left. I left them in China and they sailed over to Seattle. And one of the guys on my crew fell off in the middle of the Pacific, right? And they lost him for 90 minutes. And then the following year, a couple of people died on the race. It was the Clipper Around the World Yacht Race. And I didn't really appreciate quite how dangerous it is to be at sea. So when you sail in the English Channel, I mean, even there, you're still getting, gale force 9 winds. So you're getting some experience, but you're only out for kind of a maximum of 5 days. And actually, when you then step on a boat and you're like, okay, I'm actually going to sea here for 30 days, and I can't get off this boat. And whatever happens, you are just you as a crew, and you're going to have to get through it, whatever. So, I guess I'm glad I didn't know what I know now, but I would still do it. And it's been probably, one of my biggest teachers. And like anything in life, right, when it pushes you to the edges of you as a person, this is where you learn about yourself. So it wasn't a comfortable, cozy, sailing in the Mediterranean with a gin and tonic. It's far from that. Which is what to be honest, Amy, at the end I was craving. I was counting down the watches going, oh, wouldn't it be nice just being, on the Greek islands or something, rather than freezing cold in the South China Sea where, no opportunity to warm up for days on end.
Yeah. Wow, what an adventure, and it's hard to wrap my mind around it. But at the same time, I know that I have found myself doing some things that other people feel that same way around, right? And to me, it's just like, well, here we are, For example, last winter, my friends and I decided that we would run to the glacier, right? And we just went out for an 18-mile, 20-mile round trip run to a glacier and took some pictures and, ran back, and no big deal, right?
Yeah.
Well, but to so many folks, that's just, why would you do that? And two, that sounds cold and sort of mind-boggling. But and sitting here today, it sounds like a big adventure, right? But in the moment, it's like, all right, well, that's Saturday,
Exactly. And some of it's like time of your life, and if the desire's there, why not? There was almost like, why not now?
Right.
The reason I decided to do it was I'd just come back from Everest Base Camp, and had just enjoyed all those things that travel give you, kind of the meeting of people, the seeing parts of the world you wouldn't normally go to, the testing of all your senses, the things that just, make you feel alive. And there's a craving, right, to do more of that. And as I feel like I've learned later on in life, is actually now much more appreciation of the ordinary, which I didn't necessarily have, in those years, whatever, 5-6 years ago. So I was probably less of a desire to do something quite as extreme these days, but I can find it almost in the gentle walks.
Yeah.
But the travel I'm watching, we're all locked down here in the UK at the moment, so I've been watching a lot of Anthony Bourdain's, actually, his program on Netflix around kind of the food and cultures of the world, and it's leaving me etching to kind of want to get out and do a bit more exploring, because our time on this earth is quite short.
Yeah. So I want to pivot to the walks, and to the gentle walks. Talk to me. What is a soul walk? Define that.
So a soul walk is a gentle walk in nature with like-minded souls. Sounds nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the idea is much more, again, moving away from the extreme. It was actually about the bringing together of people with less of a, I don't know if you have the same term, almost like rambling we have here in the UK, where, people kind of want to get from one destination to another, and they're generally hell bent on getting there. And it's, we're going to hike. Come on, off we go. And it's not about that. It's just about actually, you might not actually even walk that far. So it's the meandering of just literally being outside together, and kind of having the opportunity to either walk on your own quietly, or to just speak to somebody that you might not normally come across, and to allow nature to just, for that conversation to kind of gently unfold. So it's much more of a community come together. But in the same way, even when I go out on my own, I still call it a soul walk because it's good for my soul. So it's kind of nourishing in some way for me, just to be out and connected. So that's the essence of it.
Hey humans, if you're anything like me, you probably want to handle everything in your life yourself to save a little cash, only to realize later that there are some things that really are worth paying a professional to do instead. For me, those things include auto repair and legal protection for my business. I have not worked hard to make Humans Outside a thing, only to have it fall apart because I didn't know how to register a trademark or deal with a copyright. That is why I hired attorney Rachel Brinke and her boutique law firm, Eden Law, to help me apply for my trademark. Her trademark and copyright packages pair small businesses, just like mine, with a dedicated attorney to walk me through my case and everything I need to know to get and keep my business protected. That's all after a free consultation to make sure I knew exactly what I needed. Let's be honest, we have too much nature to explore to spend our time wandering around some confusing legal stuff only to get it all wrong in the end. Check out Eden Law's trademark and copyright packages at eden-law.com today. Now, back to the show. In 2020, you plan to walk the coastlines of the British Isles as part of walking therapy in a soul walk. That's, of course, on hold because, all of this nonsense. Tell us about that project, though.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, it was kind of instigated. I went to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival with my mum. Had a great 4 days kind of seeing lots of different acts and creative expressions. And at the end of it, I was trying to get over to a place called Loch Lomond. And I fathomed that I didn't actually have that long to get there. And by the time I got there on like 2 different coaches and a bus and a train and taxi, I would almost be coming back. And I thought, when's the next time I'm going to come to Scotland to see these places? I thought it would probably be another few more years. And there's so many beautiful places around the British Isles that I've never been to. And I guess a realization, I thought, well, when am I ever going to go to them? When you're normally doing a job and you settle in somewhere, you don't actually get to find some of these places. And it's not quite the same when you just go and visit for a day and have a cup of tea and leave. It's a very different experience to walk slowly through these towns and along, the cliff edges. So I decided that, it changed plans, Amy, a few times. Originally, it was like, I'm going to do it all in one go. And then actually, as I started walking, a couple of things kind of started surfacing for myself, just like, do I actually want to leave my home and be homeless and just live on the road? Or can I do it in bite-sized pieces that actually means that I get people to come and join me on the way? So that became the plan. So I left on New Year's Day. So I had a great send-off in my hometown, Weston-super-Mare. So I had friends and family come out and join me on that walk. And then my mum and I walked along the coast, and my dad joined us. And even in that instance, it was such a rare, I guess, moment. We hadn't done that as a family, the 3 of us, for 20 years. And I thought, it's so much more powerful than just almost the destination of walking the British Isles. It's in all of these different moments. So I did a few days, and then we had storms that hit the UK just before the virus arrived. So I kind of hankered down for a couple of days with a friend's mother and father-in-law who let me stay in their cottage. And to be honest, we got up most mornings, and by the time we'd had a cup of tea and stopped chatting, it was like 1 o'clock, and the weather was the weather was still bad outside, and I had the flexibility, and again, a big teacher of life, right? Just to go, today's not the day. Let's see how the weather is tomorrow, and we'll go out tomorrow. So, the elements dictate part of it as it unrolls, I guess. But it was just, again, kind of that bringing people together in towns, particularly in some of the smaller communities around the British Isles that, have kind of issues around loneliness and connection, and this giving a reason for people to come together, and mixing that up with then just even some of my friends come in and walk, people that I wanted to walk with would come and walk with me. So one day, 2 friends came and joined me for a day's walk-in. And so much joy from it, lots of lessons learned around your capability and others' capabilities on the southwest coastal path, which in the UK is very hilly, up and down. And so again, just like life lessons being learned along the way. But actually, then I kind of I came back to London, and I met a man. So, which for me is the first time in about 11 years. So it was quite unexpected. So in an amazing way, I've been in lockdown, love lockdown. So it's been perfect timing for that. So it's on hold.
So, but I love some of the things you just picked out there, and I feel like I can learn something from this, because I am one of these people who gets caught up in a goal, and come hell or high water, I'm doing it the way I said I was going to do it. And I think there's something really important that you said there about changing what you're doing based on what you need and what you realize in the moment. And that, just because you made a plan to do X, Y, and Z does not mean that that's what you have to stick through if that's not what's best for you. And, you're pivoting based off of things you can't control, like the weather and a virus, right?
Yeah,
So, when I heard you talk about this on the Tough Girl podcast, that was not your plan, what you just described, right? And it would be really easy, specifically for someone like me who's really very goal oriented, to say, well, I said I was going to do it, so I am. Even if it's not what you needed.
Yeah, honestly, it's like the biggest life lesson, and it pans out in everything that I do. I can kind of see it. So, just almost why, like, what are you doing it for? Because as you'll notice in yourself, right? It's almost then it's about the other person, whoever that is, and sometimes they're faceless, right? So sometimes it's like, I'm doing it for all these people I said I would do it, because if I don't do it, I look whatever, weak, uncommitted. But actually it's the opposite unfolds, I believe. So like when you actually, because it's like if you fill your life with all these things that you want to do, you kind of forget the doing and the experience, and you don't allow the space for something quite special to arrive in and allow that to guide you. So even as simple as being with that, my friend's mum and dad, it's I just suddenly sat there and thought, this time will never come again. And if I'd kept to my plan, I wouldn't have probably even called them to say, can I stay with you? Because I would have been too busy getting on to the next destination. And I thought, well, again, when will this, I'll never have this moment again with these people. So, just cherish it and enjoy it, and then allow the next thing to unfold. And sitting in that real trust space is hard, right? But allowing life to guide you rather than forcing life itself.
I think there's a real metaphor there. In the beginning, you talked about being in Patagonia, where we are having our discussion, and being bowled over by wind, right? And still enjoying that moment, and welcoming those conditions as they come, and how that applies to the rest of your life, and how you tackle challenges and moments and the things that sit down in your lap, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess some of it's like to ask yourself, like, even when you finish your goals, it's like, how does it feel? Excuse me. You know, do you feel a sense of achievement when you have completed something? You know, and maybe when that disappears, or you're not maybe enjoying it as much as you wanted to, then that's the time to kind of ask yourself, you know, do I need to be so rigid with it? And can I be more flexible? And again, a great metaphor for life, right? Just to allow things in, and things, you know, everything from emotions to work to family, you know, allowing the nuances within life, rather than being so constricted sometimes.
So what is walking therapy, and how does that fit into a soul walk?
So when I trained, when I got off the boat, I ended up going to wizard school for 2 years.
Wait, what is wizard school? Explain that to me.
Wizard school it's run by a guy called Andrew Wallace, who is a psychotherapist, but let's say he's much more than that. So he's an eclectic mix of many different therapeutic practices that he's picked over his lifetime. And so we spent 2 years, there were 13 women, 2 years in his old school house just outside of London. And each, for a weekend each month, we would come together and basically work through our stuff. You didn't necessarily know that's what you were going to do. You thought maybe you were going to learn techniques of how to do therapy. But as with all these things, you obviously have to use somebody's stuff, and it's normally our own. So you go through your own process of therapeutic development. And it was, you know, again, one of the most amazing experiences, because it just strips you right back to you and your authentic self underneath everything else that you hide behind or put out to the world. So you start to really understand, I guess, what your own truth is and who you are, and, you know, the shadow, the dark stuff and the ugly stuff, which actually isn't so ugly. It's just human, and it's just part of you, but, you know, all of you. So over those 2 years, I thought, this is the work I want to do in the world. So I then went back to college and did another 3 years of therapy myself, and qualified then as an integrative therapist. And while I was doing it, I kind of knew, you know, we did a lot of Freudian work. And so the practice that we did would be very structured, you know, sit in a chair, have your tissues, have your clock, and do 50 minutes of therapy. And I kind of understand how useful that can be. And I guess I took parts of it, but thought, actually, I think there's something different here that could be offered, about actually being out in nature, just because I think nature is, you know, is our biggest teacher, and we are part of nature. So why not allow nature, you know, ourselves to or use nature to evoke emotions and to support our own therapeutic journey. So I didn't know anyone doing it here in the UK at the time, but it just felt something I guess I felt quite easily called to. And I guess, as with all these things, when it flows, it feels like the right thing. So I just started doing it, and loved doing it. So really enjoyed fully. I guess what I find is I have to almost come empty. So there's no plan, or there's no you know, route that I want to take, and I just allow it all to kind of unfold in front of me. And that feels, you know, back to, I guess, where the trust of allowing that to happen, and me getting out of my own way to allow the person to go through the experience that they need to do. So, you know, I think if you think about probably some of the best conversations you have, right, they're normally driving in a car with somebody, or they're going for a walk. You know, I'm sure, as you do most of your walking and your challenges, you have probably the deepest, most profound conversations you normally have, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, well, okay, then why would not do this, you know, as another option for therapy, rather than going to another room and another box and sitting there opposite somebody. You know, there's a place for it, I think, a containership that's sometimes needed, but I prefer myself to do the walking therapy.
We talked to, in season 2 of the podcast, a therapist called, named Judith Sidora, who talked about wilderness therapy and using the outdoors as that container that you just mentioned. Do you find that to be true in wilderness? I'm sorry, in walking therapy, that the outdoors is a container as well?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because as I even just said it to you, I was thinking about how true do I think it is for myself. Because I think when I originally started, I'd been working in addiction. So a lot of, I guess, how do you express some of your emotions? It's easy to do sometimes in a room, right? To drop into, let's say, rage or crying, or because you maybe know nobody's going to hear you if you want to have a scream. And yet, so I was wary of that when I first started doing walking therapy, about how do I, because particularly maybe if you're in the real world where there's no one around, but a lot of what I'm doing is kind of around London and in big parks, but there's always a chance somebody might walk past. So, how do you find that trust that to be able to work with whatever comes up at that moment, and not have to say, well, hang on to that emotion and we'll just walk around the corner and find somewhere quiet for you to go and scream, So just working with, and your body knows anyway, I think there's always this, just trust your body, and it knows when it feels safe. So it knows when it's safe to kind of express the emotions that it needs to. So much in nature kind of prompts that, I think. I've had moments where, you're just walking along and allow a client to kind of guide me where they want to go. And so we might go, this week we went to a tree in a cemetery, and I asked her just to pick up any props around her that might evoke emotions about how she feels now, and emotions about how she wants to feel, and being able to just leaves and twigs, and there's every element there that you can draw on, or object, to help express those emotions as well. So even, I guess, in itself, as you're saying, it's kind of like the containership of the natural world around us. Or as something as simple as, sometimes we've been walking and a horse has gone past and suddenly either dropped its load or it's taken a pee, and it could be, it's always seemingly timely. So we might just be talking about how someone's taken the piss out of them, or and then suddenly this horse is here, and you just bring that into the conversation. What is it about that that's just shown up right in front of you? So there's a real synchronicity about it as well.
Yeah. Two things.
Yeah.
To what extent is the movement of walking therapy a factor in the therapy?
Do you know what? I think I've really noticed, it's interesting, my boyfriend Andrew's just showed me a video on Meetup, which I think you have too, with a guy actually from the US who's walked across, who is doing walking therapy. And probably even 4 months ago, I hadn't seen much out there at all. And I think, given kind of the global pandemic, people being forced to stay at home and to go and exercise and maybe not commuting to work, suddenly people have really seen the benefits of walking and cycling, and of actually being out in nature. So I think there's been a real shift in terms of people doing it, but also seeing the benefit to their physical and mental health. So they're having the time to do that as well. I think time has been a huge factor in terms of people, spending so much time at work, or commuting to work, and actually suddenly having some of that time back, and being able to do something that's free, that means they can do it with another person or on their own, and probably reaping the benefits of feeling better, and that it doesn't take long. It can be, get out for 15-20 minutes, and you already go, oh, okay, that breathing, that sigh of relief, and seeing in your body, oh, I feel a bit calmer. So there must be something to this. So I think, walking is because the ridiculousness is like, we've been doing it for all our lives, clearly, and it seems the most obvious thing, and you wonder why or how we lost our way, with the motor car and with trains and commuting and taking jobs that are a distance away from where you live, and all of those things have kind of, I think, have distracted us, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, so that really leads into my next question, which was, why isn't walking therapy something that when I contact a therapist, it's on the menu, if as it were? Why isn't that a thing? Why don't we hear about this?
I don't know whether it's slightly different for you. I think there's an element of fear around it. That's what comes up as you ask me the question. So it's a good question. It's that kind of the regulation. So I didn't actually have to look too far around, but there were a few insurance companies that wouldn't insure me to do it. But there's a couple of things I think that go on. One is like the level of trust for somebody to come and walk with a stranger. On both sides, right? I'm sure for the therapist, how do you know who they are, and can you trust them? And do you feel slightly more exposed by being outside rather than in a vicinity of, either a manager, if you're in an agency, or somebody to call upon if something was to happen? But that kind of, for me, that comes from a place of fear, which isn't necessarily a helpful place to start from. But also, so both sides, but also then things like time, it's easier in a room to kind of go, here's your 1 hour. Whereas I'm generally out walking, I tend to sometimes take a little bit longer with somebody and allow whatever needs to come up to kind of unfold. So I'm a little bit more flexible with that timing. So it might be different for people's, I guess, business models. And I guess maybe to be seen. So I notice that often, which is why Soul Walk leads itself to so nicely, that people can kind of just say, I'm just going to go for a walk with Carmen. They don't need to say they're coming for therapy. And there's still an element of that stigma around being with a therapist. So is somebody going to see me? Is my partner, if my partner doesn't know I'm going for therapy, or is my neighbor going to see me, and what do I say? So I think there's some of that still there. Things like maybe walking coaching might be easier or more palatable for people rather than walking therapy. So it's been something I've played with and observed kind of what language I use. And I think partly, going back to your last question, I guess that's why Soul Walk felt an easier way for people to come in, because they're kind of, it's a bit disguised. And then they get there and they go, oh, okay, because it's all interrelated anyway, right? Doesn't matter whether you've come to talk about a job that you don't want to do anymore, or it's you generally have to get underneath it and go, well, what is it about the job that what is it about you, basically?
Right. So what advice do you have for people who want to capture that kind of walking therapy, but might not have access to somebody who's trained in this or who's insured for walking therapy, as you just mentioned?
Yeah.
So many considerations. What advice do you have?
I guess, I think there are things, the principles, I guess, of what I do, much of it you can do for yourself, because it's very often going with an intention. And I mean by that, because I know I said I come with nothing, but an intention of, let's say, being slow and going back to what we've been talking about, kind of allowing the nature to guide you. So rather than go, I'm going to go from A to B, how do you show up and just go, I'm just going to actually allow my gut to tell me where to go. And so, for me, what I think where we mostly struggle as humanity is that place of self-trust and therefore, being in, let's say, our authentic selves. So we're kind of guessing what other people want for us rather than what we need in that moment. So the biggest thing about the walking therapy is because you just keep getting reminded by me or the other person to kind of come back to what is it that your gut's saying. So, just to listen to it and be quiet. So maybe it's not taking your phone with you or not having a conversation with, somebody or listening to a podcast, but actually to go in silence. And have no intention of where you're going to go, just allow the path to kind of unfold. And if you want to go and sit on a bench, go and sit on a bench, to try and slow yourself down. Because in the slowness is where the emotions appear. And if we're too busy rushing to get from somewhere to somewhere, there's no space, or, emotion gets shut down and suppressed quite quickly. So how do you just be slow and allow and watch those feelings as they come up, whatever they are, and try and walk slowly with them?
Yeah. So really just being in touch with yourself, without somebody else there to remind you to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can see yourself get distracted, right? So quickly. We're kind of creatures of, we want to be on our own, but we want to be connected. So you find yourself like you might go and sit outside for 5 minutes and then you go, oh, I'm just going to call my mum.
Right.
Rather than like, no, stay quiet.
Exactly.
Actually give yourself that time.
When I first started doing my 20 minutes, I set out some rules. I think you've picked up that I like rules. But
I challenge you. If you came with me, Amy, I'd be like, right, there's no rules. There's no planning.
Yeah. I'd be like,
See what happens.
But what is our route? Yeah. So one of the things I considered, though, because I wanted to, be consistent, was how am I going to handle distractions? So how am I going to handle, having my phone on me, and wanting to look at that, or being tempted to, instead of just sitting outside, sit outside and watch Netflix on my phone or whatever, right? Listen to a podcast. And for a while I toyed with the idea that I would leave my phone behind every time. And then I realized that what I really wanted to do was take a picture every day and be looking for the moments to be taking that, like, what am I seeing that would make a good photo today? And so obviously I need my phone with me. And I would say over my more than 3 years of doing this, the phone has become more, or sometimes more, of a distraction, but I would say overall less. But it is hard to not do it. And when I find myself distracted by my phone, I've learned to, okay, yeah, this is not the most beneficial time outside. It's time to put it away. Another, I guess, nice thing about living where it's very cold outside is that your phone dies. So, so I have to actually keep it next to my body to keep it warm so that I can take that picture. The other thing is that mittens make it really hard to look at your phone. And so I have my phone away because I literally can't do it. So
yeah, there are ones now with those fingerprint things, aren't there?
Yeah, my mittens, I gotta have thicker mittens than that. Those don't work for me. I'm like encased in down over here. But I really relate to what you're saying about distractions and pushing those things away, because that is a decision to do that. You have to make the decision to be with no decisions, if if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of, and the phone it's addiction, right? So it's like another form of like this little dopamine waiting to give you a little hit. So it's, and like any addiction, it's kind of, there's that first craving part, and it's even noticing, it's the awareness of it, right? So it's noticing that that's it's there, trying to get your attention. And it's kind of like, okay, I see you, and just go, all right, okay, can I give it a little bit of time rather than react to it straight away?
Right.
And observe that for yourself and go, okay, it's kind of asking me to pick it up. It's asking me to pick it up. Okay, distract myself, whatever it is. What can I think about that's different to that? Or what can I see in front of me, and just focus on that beautiful glacier. And then notice that the feeling goes away. And like anything, it's the practice then of that. And then seeing the benefits of the fact that, and I guess to a certain extent rewarding yourself that you haven't picked it up So it becomes a little game in itself, how far can you walk before you had a sneaky look at Facebook?
Yeah.
Because it's hard.
I will confess that one time I was walking, it was the winter. I got a text message or something from a coworker, and instead of ignoring it for 10 minutes, responded. I mean, let's be honest, it could have waited, right? And as I was looking down at my phone, texting and walking, I looked up and I was about 10 feet from a moose, a
Oh my
huge
God.
moose, and
Yeah.
her, moose child, which is not where you want to be. And, they just kind of were looking at me, judgy, like,
What are you doing?
what are you doing? And I'm looking at them like, well, crap, and if that's not an Alaska problem, by the way, I don't know what it is. And, but I always think about that. Like, what am I mean, literally in that case, what am I missing? Right. Like a
Yeah.
ginormous moose right in front of me. But when I am doing that, what am I missing? Because I'm going to miss, a moose I love seeing moose, by the way. I just think it's fantastic. And, usually preferably not quite that close. But moose somehow managed to hide in bushes. I don't know how.
Really?
Okay. It's this humongous animal. It's almost cartoon-esque the way. So they're very, very large, but they're not very, very broad usually. And so it's a cartoon how they stand behind a tree. Like if you were a very skinny person standing behind a very skinny tree, but then you came out and you were very long. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just, it's like a cartoon. And I guess that's why we have moose cartoons, because there's nothing not funny. But they camouflage somehow in the woods, just among the dead trees. And it's just very hard to see them. And so I'm always looking for moose, and my dogs are going crazy. So I know there's one around, but I can't find it, and then you try to take a picture of it hiding in the bushes, and you got to like draw a circle on the photo, because you can't see the moose in the photo. Like, I swear to God, it's right there.
Well, another metaphor for life, right? It's almost like
Yeah.
when you're not looking, stop looking for it, and then they're right in front of you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That doesn't mean that you should therefore stay on your phone the whole time.
No, it's not. Good tip. Good note. Oh man, I love it. All right, let's move on to our leftovers round. This is the end of our time. I like to hear what, we use the word gear, and that makes it sound really official, that you're, the things that the gear you like to use outside. But the truth of the matter is, your favorite or most essential outdoor items could be as simple as your walking shoes, or I've had plenty of guests tell me that snacks are their most essential, and let's be real, that's a thing. So, so can you tell us, Carmen, what is your favorite outdoor gear? What do you love?
Yeah. Well, I have to say my mum's woolly hats. I can't not say it. So my mum, right, has knitted probably about 150, maybe even more, 200 hats. So maybe we could even do it as a giveaway, right? They're just all colours, all different shapes and sizes. Some don't fit my head, some are extra big on my head. But the amazing thing is, then when I walk, I often take a few different ones just to even change up my outfit, so that I can wear a different hat. And actually, even a woman I'd never met came and met me because she wanted to tell me about the Southwest Coastal Path, Sarah, and her mum had knitted me a hat, which I thought was like one of the loveliest things ever. So yes, kind of like, and also because obviously your hat is, or your head loses the most heat, right? So it's important to have one that is warm. So I'm not sure all mine are that warm. Probably wouldn't withstand the Alaska landscape, but they're all right for the coastline of the British Isles. And then I would always say my thermals. I think I can't go anywhere without my icebreaker thermals.
Yeah.
So yeah, the base layer is most important.
Yeah. Sounds like your favorite and your most essential all rolled up in one.
Yeah.
There's something else about a handmade hat. It's a touchstone to the person who did it, right? That thoughtfulness.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, as our final moment with you, if you imagine yourself in your favorite outdoor moment, take us there. Where are you and what are you doing?
Ooh. I feel like I should go somewhere different than Patagonia.
We can go back to Patagonia. We like it there. It's
well,
fun.
I actually want to go because I've discovered somewhere just much more local. So it's somewhere. So I live next to a park. It's called Richmond Park. It's where Henry VIII used to go hunting back in the day. But it gets quite busy, particularly at the weekends. And only in our lockdown did I discover there's a little hidden wood just off the back of it in a place it's called Bog Gate. Now it's a kind of little wooden, full of trees, and there's something magical about the energy there as well. I always seem to go and have great conversations. So it's got a few little streams running through it. At one end it has a crematorium. At the other end it has kind of a sports tennis courts and cricket pitch. But in between, lots of dog walkers and lots of hanging trees, and it, as with all these things through the seasons, just changes. So depending on what time of year you're there, you get a very different experience. And I guess just because of the magic that feels like has happened there with the people that I've taken there or been taken by. So there's something, and it's local to home, right? It's somewhere that I can easily access, and changes my state of being. So even this morning, I went there with my boyfriend Andrew. We went and got a coffee and just walked through Bog Gate, and it calms us and sets us up for the day.
Lovely. Carmen, thank you so much for joining us today on the Humans Outside podcast. We appreciate it.
Yeah, that's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Amy.
That's it for this week's episode of the Humans Outside podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for other listeners to find the podcast too. Until next time, we'll see you out there.